What was it that ultimately led to the decision to say, all right, I want to do my own thing now?
Well, so it's funny because we work with entrepreneurs for a living, and very often that story is a lot less glamorous than what you might think.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Brand, a podcast where we take a deep dive behind the businesses and brands that we know and that we love. We believe that behind every great business and behind every great brand is a great story or a great person, a great entrepreneur. And I'm excited to introduce you to my guest today, who I'm just meeting today for the first time, but I've gotten to know his mother a little bit through a leads group that we're in called Networking Now. And he is the owner of the business. And she said, you got to talk to my son because he knows his stuff. And that is Craig Doescher. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's good to have you. It's good to meet you in person. You know, I've heard your mom talk about you. I've seen your pictures up on the screen when she did her little presentation. And so it's good to actually get to, put a name to the face, a face to the name. Sorry, I said that wrong. But before we get into all the things about Doescher Group and your business, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've been an entrepreneur now for 8 years. Prior to that, I worked in a number of different businesses, and primarily have spent my time around small businesses and around kind of the transactional space, businesses that were kind of transitioning, looking for investment, things of that nature. On a personal side, I'm a dad of 3 girls.
Girl dad.
I'm a girl dad.
No boys.
No boys. Have a lovely wife, and we live in Clarkston, Michigan, and yeah, life is good.
I might need some girl dad tips because I have 3 boys and 3 girls, and my 3 boys are right, in line, and then I have 2 daughters left in the house. My oldest daughter is married and moved on. But I have these 2 teenage daughters in the house. And, with the boys, we were like really into sports. I coached basketball. We watched games. We would go do that kind of thing. And my 2 daughters are kind of into it, but not at the same level. And so I'm trying to figure out like, what are the things they like? So like last Saturday was like Starbucks and the farmer's market and, parlor donuts and all these kind of experiences, just different for me. So I'm learning as I go, even though they're teenagers now,
Yeah.
I'm so heavily invested in the boys.
Yeah.
So, but it is different with the girls for sure. So are you from this area originally?
Yes, I grew up in Michigan, grew up in Metro Detroit. And I did live away. I lived in New York City for a period of time. I went to school in London for a year, in the UK, and then also lived in Chicagoland and in Boston. So I've kind of been around always cold weather climates.
World traveler, yeah.
But I've lived in a few cities, but have been back in Michigan now for 14 years.
All of those experiences are great. I always try to get my kids in their high school years, they have to do some sort of a foreign missions trip or some sort of a trip abroad to just kind of see the world as a bigger place. It's easy when you grow up in a small town to get a very narrow view of the world and society. And
I would say even wherever you live, right?
Yeah,
even if you live in a city.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest really kind of life-changing moments for me was going to Guatemala on a mission trip when I was going into my junior year of high school, I think it was, or maybe it was my sophomore year of high school. So yeah, because you only know what you know growing up, right? And all of a sudden you realize there's this whole world out there. It really opens your eyes.
100%. No, I'm taking my 17-year-old daughter to Bolivia this summer. So I'd never been there, and there's very much parts of Bolivia that are very nice, and then there's some third world parts. So it'll be good to see both of those and to kind of open her horizons. My middle son got to spend 90 days in Japan right after he graduated high school. So that was just a life-changing experience for him.
Oh, I bet.
So yeah, so let's talk about your background a little bit. Mm-hmm. So, you've been doing this for 8 years. What kind of led up to that? Schooling, other careers? What got you into what you're doing today?
Yeah, so yeah, as I mentioned before, like all of what I've done work-wise is my background's in finance. I studied finance and accounting in college. I went to New York to do investment banking as an analyst right out of school. So I was kind of doing the Wall Street thing. So that's kind of where I got like the end of my initial education, because I feel like those first few years of work experience are really where you start to like kind of meld things.
Yeah.
And so then from there, I worked in a number of closely held family businesses and startups primarily for the next several years. And then the last 3 years before I started Doescher Group, I went to go work for an individual who had what's called a family office, where he was a wealthy individual who had made a lot of money and was making direct investments and buying family-owned businesses. That was really where the idea for Doescher Group came from, was during that period of time. So I'd spent years and years kind of like working on the company side, and then I went to the investor side for 3 years and kind of understood what that side of things was like.
Yeah. So learn the financial side of owning a business, which unfortunately a lot of entrepreneurs just don't have, don't understand, don't think about. I know for me, especially when I first started, I was 100% top line driven. Grow, 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 bring in as much money as possible, get as many clients as possible, hire the people, get the space, do all the things. And then you inadvertently build this like cash eating monster that, is just stressing you out and you can't sustain. And, then you're no longer at a point where growth is an option. Growth is survival, and you can't live without it. And so, a lot of entrepreneurs, they have this great idea, like they can make the world's greatest chocolate chip cookie. And so they turn it into a business, and they're this great cookie maker, but don't know anything about really running a business. But they had this supreme belief in themselves. So they jumped out, and they have to learn a lot of those lessons the hard way. So the advantage of you getting to see that side of it before you started your own company and understanding the vital importance of, profit and cash flow and all the things that really make a business survive, I think is fantastic. So how old were you when you started Doescher Group?
I'm going to do the math on that. About 35, 36 years old.
So
Yeah.
I mean, that's when I started at 35. I had worked the corporate world for a long time and decided I wanted to do something on my own. What was it that ultimately led to the decision to say, all right, I want to do my own thing now?
Well, so it's funny because we work with entrepreneurs for a living, and very often that story is a lot less glamorous than what you might think.
What you see on Instagram?
Exactly. So, I mean, in my case, it literally was, I knew that I was not going to make it at the job I was at. And I kind of had a sense of that 6 or so months in advance. And I'm just someone who finishes what I do.
Yeah.
So I had my head down, I continued to grind, but there was a situation that had developed within that business where I knew I was going to be kind of used as a fall guy in that situation. And really my business plan when I started Doescher Group was very simple, which is I'm going to see how long I can go without taking a paycheck from someone else.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got skills. I also had a theory about an idea, which is ultimately what led to what we do today, which we can talk more about. I'm sure we'll get into that. But that was really the impetus for the starting. Was I'd had a number of experiences where I felt like I was trying to graft onto someone else's dream.
Yep.
And ultimately, what happened was that I was let down because there's the famous meme of the guy with who's dressing himself up in clown clothes, where he's like, maybe they'll understand.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll understand, and then eventually he's just a complete clown. And I felt like that had happened to me multiple times, where I felt like I'm putting everything out for them. Hopefully they'll notice, or hopefully it
will pay off.
It'll pay off, right? And then I just never got over the hump on any of those things. But there was no chance I could do what I do now if I didn't have all those experiences.
100%.
So every single time I had a situation that didn't turn out the way I expected, it always was a building block to the next thing.
Yeah. No, I love that. I have a very similar arc in my experience and why I started my thing. I had a very successful career before this in hospitality, and I realized I was making millions of dollars for someone else. And even the best of business owners will take everything you're willing to give them. And if you are a person of integrity and character and takes pride in what you do, you will give a lot, knowing
Correct.
that the payoff is coming. But
hoping.
Yeah, that the payoff can never really be what you hope if you're not at the helm, really, because, and so that was where I kind of came to the conclusion of starting my own thing as well. And I think a lot of people are kind of in that boat, and so I guess a question I would ask you then is, for someone who's watching, who's like working a job that they're kind of feeling this way, like, I just don't know if it's ever going to pay off. I'm giving my everything, and I'm still kind of left in this spot of frustration or being just, held back. But they're a little hesitant to jump out because it's a big risk.
Right.
Going from a guaranteed paycheck every Friday to I'm only getting paid if I can convince someone that I'm worth it.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone like that of whether or not they should take the plunge?
Well, it's funny because one of the things I feel like is a superpower of mine is that people come to me when they need to be told that.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting situation when people come to these crossroads, whether it's personal life or business life. Obviously, we have clients now that ask these same questions. What should I do? And the thing that I always stress for people that are kind of feel like they're in a job that's not what they want and they're evaluating something else that looks risky is to really ask yourself the question, well, what happens if I do this and I fail? Because usually the answer is I just go back to what I was doing before.
Right.
And so a lot of times I think most people tend to really overhype the downside of failure.
Yep.
And therefore they never take that jump. I worked at Robert Bosch, the big German conglomerate, for 2 years. That was really my only experience in a large corporate environment. It was after business school. I did a rotational program there, and I found that company was an amazing business. I really have a huge amount of respect for that brand in particular, but also just what has been built there. And I saw that it was also full of people, and there were all over that company that would complain about the situation, but then just didn't do anything about it. And I think that's generally the situation of most people, is that they're comfortable enough that they'll just complain about the situation, but not do anything about it. And I just personally am a person where I'm like, if there's anything that could be made better, just go make it better.
Yeah.
Right. And so I often did that within roles. I found that I would often depend on the boss. I could be a little bit of a problem because I always wanted things to be better. I was not satisfied with just good enough.
Status quo. Yeah.
And now that I'm on my own, now I don't have to worry about that piece of it. And it's really a matter of trying to attract people that are on board with the same vision that I have.
Well, I would add a little bit to that, because I've had a lot of people approach me, and my business is not necessarily what you do, but I've had a lot of people approach me about wanting to start a business.
Mm-hmm.
And my tactic is I try to talk them out of it. Because I believe if I can talk you out of it, you're never going to make it. You're never going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in order to do it, it requires a different level of optimism. Like when I did, I'm like, what's the worst that could happen? Like you said, I could just go back to hotels if this doesn't work.
Right.
And I just wasn't afraid. Failure was not a fear. It wasn't, I knew it was very much a realistic possibility.
Yeah.
But I was like, let's try it. Right. And I had 5 kids at the time, so I'm like really taking the leap. My wife was maybe not so, confident about it. But, my friends call me the eternal optimist. So like you have to, I think in order to do it, you have to have something that solves a problem in the marketplace. Like that's the first king, right? But that by itself is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to have a belief in yourself that I can do this.
Yep.
It's going to be hard. But then I think that third element is that like that unrealistic optimism sometimes that just believes in sees the best possible outcome and not necessarily the worst possible outcome. You don't lead with it. There are some people that when you say something, their mind immediately goes to the worst possible outcome. And then there's some people who their mind immediately goes to the best possible outcome. And neither are probably the best.
Right.
But I think if you're the person that doesn't ever see the best possible outcome, then maybe entrepreneurship is not the right path for you. And that's okay.
Yeah, I would agree. Across the board, most of the entrepreneurs that I've worked with are definitely on the optimist side of the spectrum. And then I would also say part of what I think ultimately me to make that decision 8 years ago to start a business was the idea of I've kind of tried everything else.
Yeah.
And so there's like the whole idea of like when now I'm trying to forget his name, the conquistador that came to America, right? He burned all the ships when they got there, right? And it was basically telling the people, he was telling his guys, like, we're going to figure this out. And I think there is a level of like psychological commitment that is necessary. Mm-hmm. Because yes, one thing I tell people to do is to look at what happens if things go wrong. And we live in America in 2026. There's not a lot of downsides if you're a capable person. You can find something to do to make a living.
100%.
But I do also think that there's a lot of people that like to play entrepreneur and they don't actually go all in on it. And then they say, well, it didn't work out. And it was like, well, you never really actually gave it a go.
Yeah. Well, I think also entrepreneurship is so trendy right now. Right? It looks cool. That's what, people think. I think I could do that. I think I could want to do that. And that's because if you're a good entrepreneur, you know how to show the highlight reel. You know how to show people the best days. And so people see that and like, that's what I want.
Right.
And I think having a desire is you have to have that. But it is hard.
No doubt.
It is a challenge. And I'm convinced more and more that the ones who make it are the ones that just refuse to quit, because it makes logical sense many times to just go back and get a job or take a little more financial security. And so I think, to me, like I said, I have this kind of thing where I really try to not overtly, but try to talk people out of it. I try to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Because when I started, I had so many people say that this idea was a bad idea. And that you're a hotel guy. Why would you do that? You're so good in the hotels. Why wouldn't you just start something in the hotel world? And a marketing company in Owasso, Michigan, like that's never going to work. People have tried it. It's failed. That just made me want to do it so much more.
Right.
And so I think that there has to be a part of that. Like, I'll take some advice, but like, I'm going. Like,
Yeah.
let's go,
Yeah.
And then even that doesn't guarantee you're going to make it.
No.
Even that doesn't but I think you have to have that element.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Doescher Group.
Mhm.
So you decided to start this business. You had these different experiences that gave you kind of a unique perspective. And you said something that you felt was a game changer of an idea.
Mhm.
So talk about, what is Doescher Group? What do you do? What problems do you solve in the marketplace? And talk about these kind of philosophies that you have.
Yeah. So our tagline is leveling the playing field for self-made business owners. And our kind of the way we go about that is providing trusted financial guidance to people that are kind of entering, we call it like a strange and unfamiliar land. So our clients are broken into two segments: evolving businesses and exiting businesses. We started from an exit perspective. When I worked at the family office, I screened about 500 companies in the course of 3 years. And the one universal truth was that none of these companies were ready for the process of exit.
Yeah.
And for us as a value investor, that was a great opportunity as a buyer. But you're looking at all these 500 stories of 500 entrepreneurs who bet it all to build a business, and now they get to their exit and they're just completely unprepared for it. And you're like, what have you been doing all this time? Right? So that was really where it started, was the idea and the concept of, is there a way? Is there a market opportunity? There is definitely a market opportunity, but is there a business owner that would see a value in hiring an advisor to prepare them for and walk them through that exit process? Not as an investment banker who's going to represent them in the sale, but someone who's going to help them prepare and get ready for that. Because almost no business in our kind of world, which we work with businesses, our typical client has 5 to 50 million in revenue. So these would be small to lower middle market businesses. And almost none of them have a CFO who has transactional experience. At the most, maybe they have a lender relationship where they have gotten some debt from a bank. Very few of these businesses have ever done an acquisition themselves, so they've never been through that process ever. And so we watched that. I watched that play out at the family office, and that was really the initial idea. The evolve part of our business, where we provide what effectively is fractional CFO services, is really the reality that no matter whether you're looking to sell your business now or that's not even in your mind, thinking about your business through an investor's lens is really always a lens you need to be looking at your business from.
Yeah.
And so you can start from startup, which we have startup clients now that are literally just got in the market in 2026 with their product. They're from day one thinking about their business through the lens of, how am I building a valuable, enduring business, and not just waiting until, oh, I'm ready to retire now. Now I should think about what my business is worth, or what drives the value of my business.
Yeah.
And what we found is that business owners that build a business that's ready to sell enjoy running their business a lot more, and they tend to hold on to the business longer. They have a better life. Everything is better as a result of applying those principles. That was really the discovery that we had over time. But the initial kind of seedling was, man, there's an opportunity here to help some of these business owners not just get absolutely hosed when it comes to selling their business.
Yeah.
Today's episode is brought to you by AZEE Branding Agency, where we help grow your brand from A to Z. If your business is great but nobody knows it, you don't have a marketing problem, you've got a branding problem. At AZEE, we help you stand out with bold branding by creating websites, social media, video, and photography that actually gets noticed. Because attention is the #1 currency in business, and your brand deserves more of it. Learn more at azeebranding.com, and let's get your brand the attention it deserves.
How many businesses would you say that you came across that got to the point where like we want to sell, only to realize their business wasn't really worth anything?
Oh, that is very common.
Yeah.
And so I've seen that.
Other than the sentimental value that they have.
Right. So, I mean, the data is clear on this. And I mean, I've seen this repeat, over and over again. We have had to tell people, hey, your business is not transactable, and or not for anything that you would be proud to tell anybody it's transactable for. But I kind of say like businesses there's a digital signal, a 0 or a 1. Is it saleable? Right. So you either get an on or an off on that. And then there's the analog signal, which is then if it is saleable, it trades within a range. And there are a lot of businesses that are just a 0. And that number is like 70% of businesses are liquidated.
Yeah.
So you're talking about only 30% of businesses are ever going to transact. And of those businesses, only about 50% of them that get to a letter of intent actually close.
Yeah.
So you're getting into a minority of a minority to actually be there. And then there's the further data, which just is kind of like our North Star, which is that of businesses that are saleable, get sold, 70% of those business owners profoundly regret the deal they did 12 months afterwards.
Yeah.
So there's just like a stack of challenges that a business owner has where you get down to, I think when you run that math, you're down at like 10% or less of business owners sell and are happy with it at the end of the deal.
Well, and I think too, like so many businesses lease their space, so they don't have any liquidity and property value. So many businesses, like service businesses, they don't really have any like overly valuable inventory or equipment, I should say. And so their whole business is based on them and the people they hired. And if those aren't coming with the business, that drastically, I would think, drops the value of what that business is worth. And so like I had somebody offer me some money for my business a few years ago with the caveat of you're going to work for us for 5 years. Because to them, without me, the business really had no value. They didn't even want to look at my numbers. They just essentially wanted me and the services that we offer. And so when you're going through the process of evaluating a business, do you use a multiple of EBITDA? Do you use, is it sales based? Is it all of the above? Like what's your process of valuing a business?
Yeah. So we do that all the time for clients. It's usually one of the first things that we'll do with a new client that's considering exit or an evolved client that just kind of wants to have a baseline of where they're at. And so we do what's called a limited business valuation, which, all businesses kind of in this range of size that we're talking about ultimately are valued on a multiple of EBITDA based on the industry, size profile, growth, and all. There's a bunch of different factors that go into that. But
what is that multiple on average, if you don't mind?
So like I would say, and people say, don't say it depends. And I'm a guy who doesn't do that.
Yeah.
80% of businesses that are saleable trade at 4 to 8 times EBITDA.
Okay.
Like almost always they're going to be in that range. There are businesses that trade for double-digit numbers and even high teens.
Really?
Yes. And then there are businesses that might trade for 2 or 3 times. But the vast majority of businesses that are saleable are going to trade in that range. Now, the compensation of what the structure looks like, how much of that's cash, how much of that might be a seller note, how much of that might be a earn out or some type of performance-based incentive, how much of that's rollover equity, that all there's a lot of things that play into that.
Sure.
But most businesses are going to trade in that range. But the key for us is like, you can give anyone can go run a spreadsheet and give you numbers. The question is, what do I do about it?
Yeah.
And so for us, you already hit on one of them, which it sounds like when you had that conversation, they're like, we want you, right?
Yeah.
So concentration is the #1 thing. Like if you're going to take one thing away from what detracts from business value, it's concentration of any kind. Because as an entrepreneur, we talked about how optimistic we are. We understand ourselves. What we don't really understand a lot is what the investor mindset is. The investors are extremely risk averse.
Yeah.
So they're literally almost diametrically opposed to us.
Yeah.
And so where we see opportunity, I've got this great customer. They see, well, your business is totally dependent on one customer.
Right.
Or where you say, man, we are able to drive so much traffic from our Facebook ads. They see, well, what if Meta changes their algorithm?
Yep.
Or, we have this great deal on this material we're able to source from China. They say that's one supplier and they're in China.
And they might go, yeah.
Right. So risk,
Tariffs.
and the number one risk is people risk, and that is owner dependence.
Yeah.
And so we see, and the reason why 70% of businesses are liquidated is a lot of them are solopreneurship type of businesses that don't exist as soon as the owner walks out the door.
Right. Yeah, we recently went through a sale. We in 2001 we bought a print shop, which actually exists right below us.
Okay.
It was a 20-year-old print shop locally here that had a great reputation, great entrepreneur running it. Everyone in the community loved him. And he gave me a great price and was willing to do 10% down and then a 2-year amortization land contract. Didn't own a space. Well, he did own the building. We didn't buy the building. We just leased the space because we wanted to move it under our space, which we ended up doing. And we ran that business for about 3 years, up the marketing, up the sales pretty substantially, but found that business for me, unless I was willing to be owner-operator like he was very low profit margin. Like, for instance, well, I don't want to put the numbers out there publicly, so I won't, but we weren't as profitable as I had hoped. And, we purchased the business, I think at 130, ended up selling it at 170 3 years later. Each year made a little bit of profit, but not much. But because we ran it as an extension of this business, so it never was its own DBA or LLC. It was really hard to break out the numbers. You couldn't break them out on a tax return. We really could only go from our QuickBooks. And unfortunately, the people that bought it were willing to accept the numbers we provided with QuickBooks. And we essentially did a multiple of profit. And I felt like we did okay, but I definitely could have used some advice and counsel on, is this the right time? I just knew I wanted to be out of that business because it was taking a lot of my bandwidth.
Right.
And for the small amount of profit it was generating, I felt it wasn't worth me to keep it. And I wasn't willing to go be the operator. So I needed to hire an operator, which really cut into your margins. And so we found an owner operator. It wasn't an investor. It was someone who wanted to run it. And it's working really well for them now. And we have a great partnership. On the other hand, this business that I'm in, it's 100% a service-based business.
Yep.
We have no inventory. We have probably, $30,000, $40,000 worth of equipment, which in the marketplace is nothing, right? It doesn't hold much concrete value once it's depreciated and all of those things. So, and then I have a CPA who has been doing it since the 60s, and his propensity is lead with the tax return. In other words, I'm going to find a way for you as a business owner, because you have kids, to get a tax return or minimize your paying, which shows no profit in order to get there. And so I think a lot of business owners go through that process of like, well, I don't want to pay a lot in taxes, so I'm going to use every write-off known to man, and I'm going to pay myself a very little amount and then take dividend distributions as opposed to an actual W-2 check. And so they get to the point where they have a business that's doing $1 million in sales, but according to their tax return is generating no profit or very little profit. And so the value of the business is non-existent. So how do you advise someone in that situation?
Yeah. So all that can be normalized. So a big piece of what we do with clients that are moving towards exit, and even in the evolve side, because we want to look at the business on a real kind of saleable basis. So we want to really normalize those numbers. So if someone is running a lot of personal expenses, for example, through the business because they're the sole shareholder, for example, that's fine. I generally am not a big fan of that, but if they are doing some of that, that's okay. We just need to know where they are. We track them in an account and we add them back, so we can say, when we're looking at the true profitability of the business, if you were to sell this thing, right, all this stuff would go away. Your lawnmower and our investors
willing to accept that, even though the tax return shows otherwise.
Yeah. So that's all a matter of being able to articulate that. and tell that story. So, we provide extremely detailed schedules that we get support for from, we provide a huge amount of, when we talked about that risk aversion, right?
Yeah.
So when an investor is talking to an entrepreneur who doesn't know what they're talking about with the financials, it makes that investor very, very nervous.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we calm those nerves down because we handle those conversations, and we handle it not by just saying, "Hey, trust me."
Yeah. Yeah.
We do it with the spreadsheets and the backup that they need. So like, for example, when you said you were running the two businesses intermingled, right? We would make sure that we set up your QuickBooks so that you were either doing segment reporting, or we might even recommend, hey, we should carve this out into a separate LLC and track it separately.
We did have the sales segmented very well in
Mm-hmm.
QuickBooks. We didn't have the expenses as well.
Some of that's intermingled.
For instance, there was a lot of shared labor. That was probably the big one.
Yeah, right.
And so those were some of the mistakes I think we made.
Yeah, and that's totally normal and fine. Like, we've dealt with businesses that were carved out where we had to take multiple systems to try to triangulate a set of pro forma financial statements where we don't actually have, so we could say, here's the base data and here's how we have normalized that data. Here's the assumptions we made. And really what a lot of investors are looking for is, give me the logic chain to walk from A to B to C to this EBITDA number. How do I get there?
Yeah.
And so as long as you're able to provide that. Now, I would say in general though, it makes sense, especially as you're like within a few years of selling your business, to bite the bullet and pay the taxes, to have as few normalization adjustments as possible.
Yeah.
So to your point,
That's what I was going to ask.
if a business has a loss of, let's say they run break even, right? It looks like they haven't made money for the last 5 years, but then they've got $1 million of adjustments every year. There's just going to be a lot more scrutiny to this business.
Sure.
Versus a business that's making $1 million or is making $800K with $200K of adjustments.
Yeah.
Right. It's all a matter of what those adjustments are. Like, so no one's going to fault someone for, like, for example, legal is a common professional service where like they're doing your personal taxes, or they may be doing some personal trust planning and estate planning. They also might do your contracts. They also might do some bank stuff. Right. So you might have some legal fees that are kind of mixed in there. Same thing with your CPA. Generally, they're going to be running your personal stuff through and billing you on the business side mainly, not as a person, not personally. So you get the write-off. Those are all things that are kind of normal. But like we have a client right now that did a big office reno. A lot of that, some of it was capitalized, some of it was expensed. And that was a one-time thing. They're not going to do a reno every year.
Yeah.
So we very carefully went through the general ledger and pulled out every single transaction and added that back, because that's not really a true reflection of the going forward business, as an example.
Well, and I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but I'm very intrigued by it as
happy
a business.
to talk about it.
I'm 11 years in.
Yeah.
You know, I jumped all the way in like a cannonball. Like I said, very top line driven at the beginning. I kind of had the dream of the big agency, you know, the RE Gold agency. I don't know if you ever watch Entourage, but that was kind of my big dream. And we got there, and we had 20 employees at one point, and we're just killing it, you know. And but like I said, we had created this cash eating monster. Really struggled with profitability for a few years. Cash flow was a huge issue, as a lot of our clients work on a net 30 basis, which to a lot of business owners, a net 30 is like a 120-day line of credit. And so constantly, you know, and I don't come from wealth, so there's just always this like rob from Peter to pay Paul kind of situation. And so the last 2 years has really been more about scaling back the right way, determining where do I need full-time employees and where can I use freelance work, where can I use private contractors, and still maintain the same level of service to my clients. And I think we've really been able to do that and streamline it. And I'm at a point where I don't see myself selling the business. I have my oldest son right here is in the business, and he's been working it since he was 14 years old at some level, but full-time since he got out of college. And don't know that he has aspirations to run it someday, you know, and I'm just letting him kind of come to that conclusion on his own, and trying to help him through the process of whether he sees himself as an entrepreneur or as someone who comes alongside. And so there's been the thought in my mind recently of, what if I decided in 5 years, 10 years that I wanted to do something else, or sell the business, or even pass it on down to my son or to someone else. how would I go about that? And, do I bite the bullet and just pay the taxes? Or, so someone in that situation, again, with this
Yeah.
business being a service business, uh, obviously it is very dependent on me. And I would say right now, today, if I were to leave, we don't have somebody today that probably would want to run the business or maintain it at this level. So what would you advise someone like me who could see himself in 5 to 10 years, maybe moving on or looking at selling or passing it down to a child?
Yeah.
Like, what would you advise?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot there. First of all, we work on a lot of internal transitions. So we don't just prepare clients that are looking to sell externally for the top dollar. One of the things we say is that one size fits one. Everybody has their own story.
Yeah.
And so I've joked that we built an intentionally unscalable firm because every single client engagement has a little bit different to it.
Sure.
It makes it hard to completely systematize
I feel the same
it.
way. Yeah.
But it's super fun, so I don't really care. But it's like we teach a lot of our clients about how to systematize things, and then we don't. It's kind of hard for us to do that.
I get it.
The way we do it, but as it relates to internal transitions, one of the things that I think is overlooked from a lot of business owners is when they think they're going to do that, whether it's a family transition or a pass down to like a key employee or something like that, is like, well, I don't have to do all that prep work. And I would argue it's the exact opposite. Because if it's family that you're passing it down to, why do you care more about passing on a good business to a private equity investor than you do your own family? I think we have it kind of backward.
Sure.
Which is you want to pass the most valuable, most able to withstand, ups and downs type of business, right? And so the key thing to me, as if I'm just hearing you talk about where your business is at, is really
I'm not asking for a free consultation.
No.
I know there's probably a lot of people in that scenario.
Yeah, no, a lot of people are, but I mean, I'm giving it to you and just saying because it's the same. There's a lot of similarities across all this advice, but is to really figure out what that team needs to look like in order for you to become redundant. Yes. That's the thing I'm doing at Doescher Group, and we're pretty close now. There's in terms of our client base, I touch less than 25% of our clients on a weekly basis. And that's a dramatic change from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But there are still a few pieces that we're working on. The key from a value perspective is does the thing run if I'm not here? Yeah. And so one of the things I ask clients is if you go on a week-long vacation and your phone's off, right? What happens? What do you come back to?
Sure.
I famously had a client that I'm telling you, my very first meeting with him, he must have gotten 20 red, 5-alarm fires in an hour-long consultation. And I'm just like, this is a completely unsustainable scenario. Then you meet another guy and he's like, I went away for a month to Florida last year. And I, took a call every few days. Yeah. Right. And it was never urgent. Yeah. Just to check in and see what's going on. You're like, that is a great place to be as a business. Now, the big piece of that, you keep mentioning that you're in a service business. That is not really a detractor. In fact, those businesses are very investable because they're not capital intensive. Sure. But the key is not the tangible assets of your equipment. It's the intangible assets of customer relationships. Yep.
Contracts.
And your really your know-how, which is really your trade secrets. What is your secret sauce? What makes you guys, great at what you do? And so really trying to make sure you understand what those are, make sure those things are documented, and making sure that you have a team that can run the business day to day without you. Those are the things that people really need to be thinking about. And they don't need to worry about what is my actual tangible assets on my balance sheet.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that will clear up for a lot of people because it's something that I think about all the time. And, we were at a place probably 2021, 22, 23. We had just crazy amounts of growth year over year. And is that my phone, your phone? Oh, that might be yours. Okay, no worries. We had crazy amounts of growth. One year we had almost 300% growth in 1 year. Mm-hmm. And I had gotten to a point where, because I am a visionary operator by it's just my nature.
Mhm.
And so we had it set up where the thing was running itself, and it got to the point where like we had clients I never even met before. And it was
Mhm.
weird for me, but I also like, this is where it has to go. But then we got to that place. And I think probably the acquisition of the print shop was where maybe I went wrong, and I over leveraged myself too much.
You spread your own time too thin.
To where I
maybe.
had to
Yeah.
scale back and
Yeah.
even let some people go because we had got ourselves into some cash situations and kind of take on some of those responsibilities myself. So today, like I am taking on a large portion of client relations and I'm developing some people. And now kind of the process is let's grow this time, but let's grow a little more gradually as opposed to this like huge spike and a lot of it was pandemic related for us. We grew because of the pandemic.
Mhm.
People needed to transition online. And so we probably grew too fast. And so my focus now is kind of to grow gradually the right way, to slowly work myself out of the day to day and allow the business to run itself.
Well, something you mentioned before that I just wanted to go back to, which is related on that growth side, is that a lot of companies, when they come to us, they have a cash situation, right? That's oftentimes the reason someone doesn't come to us because everything's good,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They don't finally take up the offer to meet with us because everything's great and everything's fine. A lot of times they have this situation where seems to be a disconnect between, I feel like everything should be going really well, but I keep checking the bank account and it looks like we're going to overdraft every single week.
Yeah.
Right. And I can't figure out how to make payroll without it feeling like it's, and I can't pay myself, right?
Yeah.
All that that's very frequently
Very
the place
relatable.
we're at. And a big piece of that is that there's, like you mentioned, the net 30 terms. There's a lot of complex movements taking place within a business. And as you get to a point where you have a client base, in your case, where you didn't even know some of these clients, right? You can't keep all those contracts in your head.
Right.
Right. And so what you really need, and that's what a lot of our clients need, and it's a very simple tool, which is called a 3-statement financial model, because most businesses they're pretty decent at projecting revenue. Some of them are pretty decent at even projecting their income statement and their P&L, right? They can actually say like, this client, or at least at a client level, right? Like, here's what I'm charging them. Here's the staffing I'm going to put on it. Here's the material cost. Here's the gross profit. And then they have a good sense of maybe what their overhead is. But what they don't have a really good sense on is the timing of those cash flows. And so a lot of times companies feel like they're running out of money when they're actually profitably growing. And that's just that's a working capital problem. And that can be solved with a bank, right? You don't necessarily have to come up with those resources yourself. That can be solved with a bank. And that's often where they need someone like us to come in and tell that story and to present that story, to say to the bank, hey, every single month they're printing profitability, but from a cash perspective, they're generating negative cash flow. Well, why is that? It's because they're growing and their receivables are growing at a rate where they're not collecting them fast enough.
Yeah.
In order to pay their people. And unfortunately, people don't give net 30 terms, right? They want to get paid weekly or bi-weekly at the most, typically. Right. So that is a very common issue that businesses run into. And man, does it give them a sigh of relief when they understand that my growth is I'm not running out of money. I'm running out of money for a good reason.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes it's the opposite, right? Where it's like, oh my gosh, you took on some terrible contracts.
Yeah.
Right. And we find that out and it's like, okay, well, now we can't double down on a bad idea. We got to figure out how to extract ourselves from this situation. And usually in a client business, that means you got to play it out.
Yeah.
Right. Like you don't walk off the job. But understanding is this pain I'm feeling because it's good growth or bad growth is a really important.
Makes perfect sense. And it's
a
very
really
relatable.
important question.
Yeah.
And on the other side of things, maybe not something you deal with in your business, but we see this very commonly as well. If you're taking in customer deposits, if you're in a situation where customers are paying you in advance of you providing the services, that is a liability.
Yeah.
It feels good to see that money in your bank account, but guess what? You have not provided the service yet.
Right. So you have
And so you can have the exact opposite situation where you go out and you start spending on things, you fix up the office, you hire employees, and then before you know it, you realize that now I have to go do that project.
pay all the labor.
And the money's gone.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So these are very important pieces. And the 3-statement financial model it actually tells you what your monthly cash flow is. as well as what your monthly profit is. And cash flow and profit are not the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we might need to have another conversation off camera. I really appreciate you sharing all that. And I, like I said, I was reading up on your website, very intrigued by what you guys do. And I think there is certainly a market for that, because a lot of entrepreneurs I meet and talk to get in that position where they're like, man, we are doing such good things and we're bringing in great revenue and we've cut back expenses, but everything seems tight still. And that makes perfect sense. So let's talk.
Amazon, right? They lost money for 2 decades.
Yeah.
They were cash flow negative for 2 decades, right? Obviously, they were growing to become one of the largest companies in the world. That was but they were doing that intentionally.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, those are things that I think, again, a lot of entrepreneurs get in with no experience in finance, running a P&L, running a balance sheet. Like, my first hire was a bookkeeper, because me handling just even the invoice, when I hired her, it took me almost 6 months after I hired her to give her full access to everything, because it was embarrassing. And she had found, like, in the first week, she found, like, you realize you've done work for these 4 people, you've never even billed them for it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like, just doing work for free.
Well, you're a visionary. You're not a details guy. I'm guessing details are not your favorite thing.
No, not at all. I get my eyes start to glaze over. You show me a spreadsheet, but I'm learning more and more that it's important. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they get into it with this skill or this mindset, but that very important piece, they just don't understand the importance of it and overlook it. And so I think that's there. Now, we've been at this a while, and I think this is very, very valuable information. So I'm certain that people are going to find this very helpful. But I want to take just a few minutes and learn a little bit about you. We've learned a little bit about your past and why you got into it and your passion. But certainly you've been at this for 8 years and you've had different experiences. What would you say to the people watching is a key or some keys to being a successful entrepreneur?
Perseverance, number one.
Yeah.
It's a matter of a lot of businesses don't end up. I'm kind of a bit unique in the sense, I would say, in that my initial idea is kind of what I'm still doing. Most businesses started as something else. It's so funny how many of our clients have a name, and you in branding probably laugh at this, right? Where they have a name that just doesn't even relate to what they do.
Yeah.
And why is that? Because that's not what they set out to do originally.
Yeah.
So I think perseverance is a huge piece of it. Just can't kind of stay at it. One of the things that my marketing coach, he's been with us for 5 years. Before I hired any employees, he was very clear about, and this is now comes through everything we do, is tell people what it is you do. Like, it sounds simple, but in a service business in particular, where you're just getting started, it's very easy to just find someone who's willing to pay you to do something.
Yeah.
And then what you end up doing is a bunch of random things where you're getting paid, but you're not really building anything, and you may not even really like what you're doing, because part of why we start our business is to do something we're interested in.
Yep.
And so telling people what it is we do really changed the game for us, in the sense that all of a sudden we started getting referrals that were people that were better qualified to do the work.
Yeah.
And then I keep going back to the concentration thing, but building a team, getting the right team in place. We're big fans of the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS.
Yeah,
we love EOS, and EOS with the right people, right seats.
Yep.
Which is not an original Gino Wickman idea, but just so key.
He made it systematized.
Yeah, he made it approachable and actually implementable. And I think that piece of it is just so key. If one of the things when I founded Doescher Group that I committed to early on was like, I'm just going to be a solopreneur. That was really my plan.
Yeah. Me too.
And really the big reason why I changed my mind on that was EOS, because what I realized is that when I had managed people before, I was doing it with like no tools.
Yeah.
And it's just so much easier when you have the right tools in place.
Yeah.
Because it's not really about trying to manage people. It's much more about trying to create the right accountabilities and create the right environment for them to thrive.
Yeah. And the one thing I would say about EOS, and I'm very similar in it, the reason I decided to kind of expand was I met with an EOS implementer. I'd read Traction, and I thought this makes perfect sense. Have the business you love, work 80% in the business, or 80% on the business, not in the business. All of those things resonated with me very, very much. And so we hired an implementer and even a consultant to come help us kind of get it all set up. And what I found is, as opposed to hiring what the business needed at the moment, I was hiring seats. You have basically the 5 basic seats. And so putting maybe the wrong people in the wrong seats because I was just trying to fill a seat. And then also, I think something that the book doesn't really address, and certainly an implementer doesn't address, is you don't necessarily have to have 5 people to fill the 5 seats right now. You want to work towards that.
Yes.
But, and they say you should never be in more than 2. Well, sometimes you might have to be in 3 or 4 at the beginning, but you're still making sure those seats are covered with the goal of filling those seats as you're able to. And then also in a business like mine, like some of those seats, like the admin and finance, can be filled with a freelance bookkeeper. Correct. Or someone, not necessarily someone I have to have on staff all day. So we've kind of adapted. My favorite thing about EOS is the VTO. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's a really helpful tool. We've actually kind of created our own thing here called the ABO, which is the VBO, the Vision Brand Organizer, where we help people organize their brand.
Yeah.
I think it's a phenomenal tool. And I also love the way they set up the L10s and the quarterly. So there's some things that we pulled from it. And at a business our size, we've adapted it to fit us. And I think I've seen some people, and I think one of the mistakes we made is we tried to have all these executive level seats filled, and we were overpaying some people to do things. So I just think you have to adapt to where you're at and not necessarily try to be all of it today,
100%.
So, yeah.
I mean, I am not a certified implementer. We just really love it, and we use it.
Too. Yep.
And I would agree with you 100%. I think that it's really good to have an implementer for the purposes of understanding like the orthodox way of using it.
Yeah.
And then you really need to, there's certain aspects that need to be adapted, but there are certain things that I think 100%, like the whole idea of meeting every week, the meeting structure. I mean, we bring people into our organization and they're like, for 35 years, I've been in the workforce. I've never had a meeting where we met, we decided what we were going to do, and we come back the next week and everyone's done it.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's incredible.
You know, that alone is gold.
Yeah. And it's a great system for entrepreneurs because most entrepreneurs do fit in that visionary role.
Yeah.
And that means a lot of other things get neglected. So it helps you even really determine what seats should I be looking for and working on.
Yeah.
What would you say is the as a business owner, the thing you've done that you're most proud of to date?
I think really it goes back to what we talked about earlier about the idea of trying to live other people's dreams.
Yep.
So the fact that I've created something that's more my dream is something I am very proud of. What I'm also proud of is the team that I've assembled around that dream. It's really just fun. Like I'm motivated to talk to everybody every day, to go into the office. We have an office, but we're relatively hybrid, but whether it's jumping on a call with them, just the fact that we've got this great team, like it is very, I guess maybe cliche, but it does feel fulfilling to have built something like from nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah,
absolutely. Well, that actually segues perfectly into my next question is we talk a lot on the podcast about success. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big believer that success has to be determined individually. Mm-hmm. What might be success to you might not be success to me.
Right.
And so I think that a lot of entrepreneurs go wrong because they never really determined what is success in their business. And so they're beating their head against the wall, not even realize they've probably achieved success.
Right.
But they didn't have anything to measure. And so like for me, like success is happiness. I read a statistic when I was young, 94% of Americans hate their job. Yeah. So many people get up every day and they go to work angry, bitter, unhappy, and they come home and they bring it with them and they just dread the next day and they only look forward to the weekend and it's just a miserable existence. And so for me, I'm like, I want to be happy. Well, this business has given me a lot of happiness. Like I wake up most days and I'm excited about what I'm doing. I get to go to work. And so even when financially things are struggling or when it doesn't make sense or like it's like this is tough, what helps me go is like this is giving me the success I wanted. Mm-hmm. And so keep going. The money's going to come or this is going to happen or this contract's but the determination of success in my mind and knowing what I'm shooting for helps me every day.
Yeah.
And if my only definition of success was $1 million in the bank, well, I would feel like a massive failure right now. But but that's not my definition of success right now. And so to you, what do you think is a good definition of success, and what is the key or keys to get there? I know you talked about perseverance, but
Yeah. Honestly, I really love, not to go back to EOS, but I love the EOS Life book as well, which I don't know if you've read that one,
I have.
but you know, he defines the EOS Life as doing what you love with people you love, being compensated appropriately. Oh, sorry, making a difference, being compensated appropriately, and having time for other passions.
Yep.
And I think that pretty well does summarize it. I know he put a lot of thought into that, and I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like,
Sure.
like so I do feel like that is the case, right? Like I've mentioned my team a lot.
Yep.
I love the kind of work we do. You know, we make a huge difference in the life of our clients, and that is just awesome.
Yeah.
It's a great feeling to be able to do that. So I do feel like we're making a difference. And then, you know, as an entrepreneur, the compensated appropriately thing is something that is, you know, some years it's
a moving
like
target.
Yeah, you got to look at it on an annual basis. In essence, like it's not a weekly thing, right? Like there's many months where I'm not able to take anything from the business, and then there's great years, you know. And another thing Gino Wickman says is, out of every 10 years, you can expect 2 great years, 2 bad years, and 6 average years. And I think that's a good thing to keep your mind on.
Yeah.
Because there are bad years, but that's
For
part
sure.
of the entrepreneurial life.
Part of the experience.
And I do love what I do, but I also I have other passions.
100%.
And I want all my team to feel that way. One of my jokes, it's a little bit of a joke, I say it tongue in cheek, but it's been true so far, which is, anyone who joins our team, I want them to retire from our company. That's the way I'm trying to set the business up.
Yeah.
It's really about bringing this team together and having everybody be able to live that life.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. That's a great vision. Great answer. Well, listen, we've been at this for 55 minutes and we've uncovered some really good stuff that I think are going to really help people. Again, the thing that I love about this podcast is, we're talking to entrepreneurs. There's so many things that are relatable to the people that watch this. We have a heavy concentration of business owners that watch the podcast. And so, you know, I think that a lot of things were talked about today that were super helpful and very engaging, and I think is going to be a good launch pad to get people thinking. And I think you might get some people to reach out to you from this. So before we go to our last segment, which is called Say It in 60, I want to give you an opportunity to look into this camera, tell people what you want them to know about Doescher Group, and then how they can reach out to you, or who are the people you're looking for.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we have a 10-year goal of advising 1,000 companies, and that does not mean that that's 1,000 clients. Anytime we get the opportunity, this conversation counts to us as a company advised, because we want to share our expertise with business owners, and some of those will become clients, and that's what will keep our business going. So just go to our website, DoscherGroup.com. The name is spelled, I know it'll probably appear in the podcast, but Doescher, and you can go through our contact us page. Craig is my email, but contact us. We're always happy to have a conversation. We love talking to business owners. We love hearing their stories. And a lot of times what we find is that we might meet with you, and then a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, there's an opportunity that comes along. So we do not see it as you wasting our time to have a conversation. As I mentioned before, our typical client base is between 5 million and 50 million in revenue. We do work with smaller companies, and at a minimum, any conversation we have, we're going to leave you in a better place. That is our commitment to anyone that really wants to meet with us.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being my guest today. I really enjoyed getting to know you. And I think we should set up a time in the near future to have some coffee and continue our conversation. And, maybe we can work together as well. I think that there could be some benefit, maybe both ways. So
for sure.
Okay. So we're going to do this segment called Say It in 60, where we take 60 seconds to get the last ounces of wisdom we can from our guests, and just to get to know a little bit more about you. So 60 seconds to answer 10 questions. The record right now is 41 seconds for this season. Wow. So you got some shoes to fill. The only prize is bragging rights. So Are you ready for this?
Let's go.
Micah, we got the timer. All right. The timer starts now. Favorite hobby?
Skiing.
Favorite place you've ever been?
Cape Town.
Favorite food?
Ribeye.
A must-read book?
Notes from the Underground by Dostoevsky.
Favorite podcast?
The Martyr Made podcast.
A daily habit everyone should do?
Silence.
A TV series worth binge watching?
Succession.
In your opinion, what would help your brand grow more? High-quality photography or high-quality video?
Video.
A great website or great social media presence?
Website.
What is the number one key to success? Last question.
Don't give up.
Don't give up. And 12 seconds remaining. Studio audience, round of applause. Very good. Very good.
Let's do it.
Succession is a great show, by the way.
That is
We just finished that a couple months ago. So, well, man, thanks for coming on today. And thanks for being my guest. We had a great conversation here. An hour. We feel like we're Joe Rogan. You know, we're just having the long podcast. But I think if people stuck through this one, maybe through 2 commutes, I think they're going to find some really good stuff. And I hope that this really helps you guys. And your mom is fantastic. And when she did her presentation, her 10-minute presentation, it was such a good representation of you and of the company. So it was awesome. She's a classy lady. So
glad to hear that.
Anything else you want the people to know before we go?
No, thank you so much for having me.
That's my pleasure, man. And welcome to Owasso.
Thank you.
Home of the Polar Express, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you all for watching. And hopefully you'll reach out to Craig. Maybe you're a business owner and we talked about some things today that just absolutely resonated with you, that absolutely made sense and made you feel like that's where I'm at. Reach out to Craig and have a conversation. It may result in just a good coffee conversation. It may result in doing some business together. But either way, I know he and his family are great people and will take good care of you. And hopefully you'll reach out to them. So, again, thank you for watching today. Remember, as my mother always said, you can't and never could until you tried. So go out there and try something great, my friends, and don't take the easy way out. We'll see you next time.
Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. We want to connect with you. Drop a comment, share your thoughts, and let us know what guests you want us to have on the podcast. Follow us on social media for more branding insights, and thanks for watching Behind the Brand.